Welcome to the listeners to the NCR podcast.
Sweet. Welcome to the NCR podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Mike Gauvreau, co-owner?
Owner.
Owner.
Yeah.
Full owner of
Optimize Physiotherapy and Sport Medicine. So we're in Ottawa, Riverside South. So, yeah.
Great neighborhood.
Yes, I know. I know you're out there.
Yeah,
so.
it's a great neighborhood. Lots of schools, young families, parks. Yeah, it's awesome.
It's growing. It's like we set up about 4 years ago, and just looking at the prospect of growth in the area is something. And then the LRT now is going out there, so
huge.
probably still take another 5-10 years. But yeah,
Awesome.
Nice. So those of you who don't know, we got a Mike just partnered with us and put a satellite location in CrossFit NCR.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike's been around the gym quite a bit. Some of you, maybe if you're a member here, you may have seen him. If you're not, then this is going to be your first introduction to Mike. But we're going to talk about some physiotherapy, talk about how Mike has grown so much in such a short period of time. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background of you and sort of how you started Optimize?
Yeah. So I actually did biology in university in undergrad, and then didn't know what I wanted to do at the end of that. So my dad's actually a sport med doc. So I saw a physiotherapist growing up. He worked with physios. So
He works with you, right?
Yeah, he works with us. So we're a sport medicine clinic as well. We've got my dad's in there, and then Dr. White is another kind of younger doc who's joined us. Similar mindset, and that's one of the things. We all have kind of a similar mindset, and that's what kind of drives us forward. But so biology, got into physio after that. I went to Western, that's in London, Ontario, and then from there, I came back and I started working in Ottawa. So I immediately was, I knew I didn't want to work in like the standard type of physio clinic, because what exists for the most part is essentially you're going to be seeing 3 or 4 people an hour, really machine based, so modality based, and unfortunately, it's what people think about as physiotherapy in a lot of cases. And unfortunately, I think that's giving us a bad name in some cases. So I saw what I didn't want to do, and then I always had an idea of what I wanted to do. So melding, we'll get into that, but melding like strength training principles, mobility principles, just a really active approach, empowering the person to take control of their own body. So that's kind of where we started, and then from there, just kind of built up from there.
So basically, the traditional physio, when you're seeing 4 patients in an hour, there's just not enough time.
Not enough time. It's all based on, it's profit driven. So the company is making a lot of money off of you. You're seeing, crazy amount of people, but you're not able to actually work one-on-one with them. So you're sending them off. It's almost like you're shipping them off to work on the things that matter, which is like their exercises, the movement part of things, education. You're shipping them off to other people, and then
Right.
they're using machines the whole time too. So yeah, basically the whole model I think needed to change, and that's what our goal is, to kind of be an example of what it can be and what it should be. So yeah, that's kind of driving us.
Is that an example of maybe like the old guard versus the new guard in the physiotherapy world? Because I see like that's somewhat of a trend of people our age, maybe, or like people coming into the physiotherapy world as opposed to the old guard, maybe.
For sure, I think people are starting to wake up to that, and I think it's just the unfortunate part is there's not enough places that support that model, so that even though there's a bunch of, each year there's tons of graduates, and they're like, okay, here's how I want to treat, but then they have to enter a workplace where it's like you just can't treat that way. So they often get disenfranchised, and almost, I almost got burnt out the first few years because I was working in a way that I wanted to make a huge change in people's lives, but I just didn't have the time to do so. And I saw what was going on behind the scenes, and things like just weird stuff like quotas, and the owners of the businesses or the managers saying you have to see people this amount of times per week, that type of thing. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is not what I thought it was getting into it.
Sounds like a global gym.
Yeah. I was just thinking of the parallel to the fitness industry for sure, but It's more like so do you think like the old guard or the more like franchise physiotherapy clinics have look at maybe your business model and say like it's impossible you'll be making money. You know, you're spending too much time with each individual client. You know, you're not as efficient as you can be with your hour. Is that how they look at it maybe?
I would say so, yeah. Because if you looked at just straight up numbers on a page, short term, I would say looking at short term versus long term too. In the short term, it's not going to be as profitable. Thing is, you can still be profitable. It's just a matter of, are you going to be as profitable? But I think that the problem is that a lot of these businesses they're predicated on like continual growth and infinite growth. So, for instance, a couple of companies in Ottawa just got bought out by publicly traded companies. So it's like, okay, now they're having to appease their shareholders. They're trying to keep numbers going in this certain direction. So it's like, where does it end? Like, do we get people in more and more? But the problem is, like, something's got to give, because patients who come to see us are like, oh, like, this is a much better experience. Like, I'm never going back to somewhere like that. I felt like I was a cattle being shipped through.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think we're going with repeat customers, word of mouth, and it's like we're starting to grow organically that way because people are seeing the difference there. So we're just sticking to our guns because you can still be profitable and and have a good business model that way.
That's what I find interesting in the physiotherapy world, because in the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if you see a client, wouldn't the overall goal be to never see them again?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. So it's like, you say repeat customers and bringing people back to the clinic, but at the end of the day, like, you want them out of the clinic.
You want them out of the clinic. You want to create, you do want to create like an independence over time. What we're finding is that now that we have the resources and time to spend with individuals, we're able to delve into other aspects of their health. We're able to talk to them about the stresses they have at their workplace, get into like basics of nutrition, just some other basic stuff. Whereas, because these are all factors contributing to their whatever it is, their knee pain that they come in with. It's never just as simple as like you have something hurts. Sometimes it is like you fell on the weekend, it hurts, but oftentimes there's some deep levels of it. So we're able to see them. So that allows us to see them maybe not as frequently, but maybe slightly longer, right?
So you're diving in more in the philosophy of injury prevention.
Overall health, because unfortunately, like, a lot of people don't have anybody to go to for general health, like, and they're often like they're missing the boat on some basics. Like, nobody's ever talked to them about their sleep, stuff like that. So yeah, we're able to go into that, and then it, like I said, the word of mouth. I think a lot of times, if you go to the stories I've heard from people who go to other places, it's almost like, hey, I'm going to tell my family and friends to not go there because of the experience I had, and we're going by the opposite, hopefully saying like, hey, they didn't try to rip me off. They were honest. They were trying to help me. Maybe I didn't see them as long, but they're going to tell their family and friends to go there because of that. So, yeah.
Great.
The reality of a health-based business practice too is like you'd rather not see the person because they can stand on their own 2 feet and stay healthy, but the population is so big. Like, think of a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor would rather not see you because you're healthy, but at the end of the day, everyone needs a doctor, and there's many people that the doctor will always be busy. Same idea with the physiotherapist, So, no, I think that's good what you're doing.
Look how many physio places there are, like, just in Ottawa.
Yeah,
it's nuts. It's like every corner so it's like, okay, clearly there's people going to these places or else they wouldn't exist. So it's not a matter of that. You're right. It's like there'll always be people too that you can help, and there's different levels of it too. Like, some people were going more for performance, in terms of like they might be an athlete with something nagging going on, and we're just looking at cleaning some little things up. Whereas other people, it might be a complete kind of revamp and get them to look at just getting them moving again and stuff like that. So.
I mean, if you're focusing on the quality too, you're always gonna make it more likely that they're gonna come back to you instead of someone else.
That's another
thing.
Like
you just said, you can't even count the number of times someone has defected from one of these crappy physio clinics and come to you being like, oh my God, I feel like I'm being treated like a king and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I bet you 9.9 out of 10 times they're gonna come back to you.
That's the thing.
Unless they like move to some other city.
That's it.
Can you talk a little bit about your overall mission for the company and for yourself? Because if you guys don't know, Mike has an unbelievable following on Instagram, And like the stuff that you put out is real good stuff.
What's
you
the
know?
handle? What's your handle?
It's at optimize.physiotherapy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there's just a lot of good stuff about functional movement, and the reason why we found that this partnership was obvious is because of your focus on that stuff, and what we do in the gym is essentially the same. So and you also travel and you give seminars, so people pay lots of money to come learn from you. So, and you run the business, and now you're here 1 day a week. So you seem to be doing a lot of stuff, and even just, taking care of that Instagram is probably a lot of work, right? So
Yeah.
what's, where's this going? What's the mission? What's the overall goal?
So I think from a local standpoint, growing the brick and mortar business, I don't want it to become like a franchise, I would say, but I'm never going to put limits on that. But I would say just growing that organically and helping just give other physiotherapists, like I said, a chance to treat how they want to treat. So I want to give other physios, and I want to show that like physiotherapy doesn't need to be what people think it is, and it's just about that opportunity to give others the chance. And then from a teaching standpoint, I want to just make that same change more globally in the country, outside of the country, just trying to educate new upcoming physios, especially on how things can be done, how things maybe should be done, and just being a good force for health in general, because I think as you guys know, it's a little rough these days, and people are having trouble just keeping it together in terms of their basics of health, movement, and all of that. So I just want to try to be a force for good. And but another thing is, like, when I went to physio school, the stuff I learned, I realized shortly thereafter, because having a background in sports, strength and conditioning, I realized, what we're being taught is not necessarily the most effective way to do things. And there's, like I said, hundreds of physiotherapists in Ontario alone just being trained each year this way. So when I go to, I'm going to London, Ontario this weekend to teach at Western, so some of the students there. So when I go to these places, I just try to show. I'm not saying to say like what you're what you're learning in school is wrong. I'm just trying to say here's another way to look at it. And oftentimes it just opened people's minds up to and just trying to give people some excitement, because sometimes they're actually met with some frustration when they're learning these kind of outdated ways of doing things, especially in social media age, where they're like, hey, I see these people doing this stuff online, but we're learning this stuff. It's like, what's going on here?
Right.
So trying to break some of the confusion there with the teaching aspect of things. So
the new ways of doing things. You're talking about using more of a functional movement based approach, like to rehabilitate versus like manual therapy type of thing. Is this?
Yeah. So it's just like, and there's a lot of debate on this in the rehab world. It's like what works, what doesn't work. Let's start talking about like the actual mechanisms behind what's working. But the consensus is that like movement strengthening. I would say that like movement, the strengthening can be considered part of movement. Movement is kind of the answer that we want to take advantage of movement as one of the pillars of health, and use that as our modality to get people better. So movement can be a modality to allow people to, if you just consider basic exercise, just getting somebody's heart rate up, that's a modality to improve their mood, improve their mental function, cognitive function. It's a modality to help them lose weight, things like this. Movement is a modality to help break fear associated with injury. It's a modality to help strengthen tendons. So it's basically an overarching modality that we can use to help people out.
And at the end of the day, it's the movement dysfunction that's the reason they're coming to you anyway, right? So
exactly.
If you can fix that function and make the movement a little bit better quality.
Exactly. And it's a combination of like some of these people that we see, it's a matter of like they're just not they don't come from a physical background. So a lot of times it's like getting them reacquainted with just moving their physical body around and showing them what it's like, and sticking to basics at first. Like can you complete a hip hinge? Can you do some basics? And then we can start to, and that's the thing is like, we start down this path, and maybe we get them out of pain, or maybe we help with that, but maybe they continue with us a little longer because maybe we can work on adding some other movements to their repertoire and just building them more of a buffer. A little bit of a strength buffer goes a long way, as you guys know. Because it's like, if I don't want to just get you out of pain, because I don't want to see you back, ideally. So maybe we can build that up. So
that sounds like it's almost you're almost building a base, not just like a strength buffer, but you're giving them the tools that they need to maybe start continuing a strength program of their own.
Yeah.
You know, and then maybe that's what the thing that keeps them from coming back is it's not just what you've done for them in the clinic, but they actually can start to be more physically active on their own,
Exactly.
be confident that they're, you know, doing a proper hip hinge or doing
confidence. It's the movement confidence and movement competence. It's kind of the both. And once they understand that, a lot of people are just not confident with using their bodies, and they're very hesitant and fearful to enter a gym setting and things like that. You put an injury or layer an injury on top of that, or some sort of pain, it makes it 10 times worse. So they don't, like, the last thing they want to do is enter a gym. So part of it is that, and then, you know, you can work up from there. But
so when you go to the lectures and you talk about all this stuff, there's good reception, there's positive feedback that you're getting from the students and all that?
For sure. And like, sometimes people have to digest it a little bit. Sometimes it like anything, I think that a sign of a good seminar is if you go to a seminar and it kind of makes you a bit uncomfortable, that's a good thing, because it's like, it makes you think about, like, how might have been doing things, and maybe it makes you want to change the way you're doing things. But the uncomfortable feeling is a good thing, and I think that happens sometimes. But people generally are really receptive to it, and I don't try to teach. I teach specific exercises and stuff like that, but I try to teach more the principles behind it all, and, like, what we want to try to do with people, and because everybody's going to present differently, so it's a matter of, like, where do we want to go with somebody? What's the goal of all this? So.
Is that organized by, like, Western University, like the program, or you're just having it? Okay, you're having it on campus.
They actually tried to shut it down last year because
I
made connections with one of the students there. This is the third year in a row that we're doing it. So, but yeah, last year we tried to do it on campus and rent a room for them, and then the professors found out, and they did an announcement to all the students and said, "Hey, we strongly suggest that you don't take any extracurricular courses until after you graduate." And right after they found out, and we're like, "Huh, this is interesting." So we did it anyways, and we just we rented a room like privately, and I'm doing the same thing this year. Okay. So, yeah.
Would you say that the scientific research out there for physiotherapy, in terms of the old guard, the amount of literature just in sheer volume outweighs the amount of literature of the new guard, like, supporting it? And this is kind of why the teaching obviously hasn't started to switch over yet.
I would say that's a big part of it. Yeah. That being said, we're starting to see some really good research, and like, I went to a seminar a few weeks ago by professor or a physio named Greg Lehman, and he kind of presented all of the newest research and all the research that's existed. And again, we can paint a good story with research. I think a lot of times we can kind of abuse research or make our own story with it. But I think that the overarching theme was that, like, what works, and finding out, like, if you look a bit deeper into the research, you will see that, like, some of the machines that they use don't have good evidence for them. Ultrasound, stimulation, like, or it's like, what do they actually do? They work for what they're supposed to do, maybe temporarily decrease pain, but they don't fix you. Yeah. So what does work? And it's all pointing to, like, movement, and even the psychosocial aspect of it, which has kind of been really popular. The biopsychosocial model, just changing the kind of model and the framework we use, because it's not just the bio part, and a lot of people get medicalized, and they get diagnosed with something, and they get very fearful. So you need to look at all of these things combined, and there's good research on that coming out. But you're right. I think
it almost seems like for them to be convinced that your lecture is worthy, for the students, it needs to be, like, shoved in their faces a little bit. Like, the evidence does, show that this stuff actually works, and
you can find the evidence. It does exist. It's just you need to paint your own story with it, and then and unfortunately, there's no overarching, like, there's no single study showing this. As you guys know, it's not like, hey,
it's a collection.
It's just a collection of things that we can use to kind of to lay this out, and but fundamentally, it makes sense. And if you go by, like, the fundamentals, and you use scientific research papers, principles along the way. Clinical practice is a night, like, that is science right there too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you look at the results of your clinical practice, and the number of people that walk away, from your clinic with positive results, like,
that's a thing, and it's I don't know. It's just one of those things. The science is always kind of slow to catch up, and
big time.
And then the school part of things is the other difficult thing, because schools take time to update their curriculums, and it's just it's kind of the nature of having a curriculum is such that you can't just like change it on the fly. You have to like go through loopholes, and it's tough.
It's the Physiotherapy College of Canada. Is that what it is, or
it's that's like the governing body. So there's like the college that. The schools have to update their curriculums because they get like audited every 5 years or something like that. But it is what it is. I mean, some schools are known to be better than others, and I think that it depends on like people like me trying to teach others outside of school. There's also the individuals within the school system that are taking it upon themselves to teach. And I know some pretty good professors who are like, here's what we need to teach you, but also here's like the real shit almost, right? Here's the stuff that works, and they just kind of take it upon themselves, and they're actually good teachers. So we need more of those people.
Yeah.
So basically, every physiotherapist goes through the schooling. They go through a series of tests, right, to get accepted into the physiotherapy college, or
so there's 2 national exams, one written, one like practical, and you have to pass both of those after you have a physio degree. So
based on what you've learned in school, and then after that, you're free to practice and do whatever you want.
Exactly.
Right. So
So
now that you've had your clinic for how long?
Just past the 4-year mark.
4 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So like, walk us through a little bit of your treatment plan. Like, I see you in the gym, with people for like 30 minutes, just like going over the air squat and like just basic hip hinging, like you said. Like, talk us through that a little bit. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah. So initially, I'll screen somebody's movement. I mean, initially we need to get a good story of like why are they here? What are they in for? So I try to pick up as much information as possible, and we try to get all our therapists doing a similar thing, because we need to look at the whole picture. But as we know, like, movement doesn't lie. So once we get the movement, we can see a lot more as to what might be happening. So it's an initial good history that goes on, figuring out what are their goals, what's going on, where do they want to get. Sometimes it's like little things. People are so mad because they can't get back to like something specific that it affects their whole life, and they kind of go in a downward spiral. So anyways, you want to get to, after that we get to movement, and we just see like what are their movement habits, what movement options do they have, what's their mobility like, so what is their baseline joint mobility like. Just kind of putting that all together, we find I like to think of putting people in boxes. If we're looking at just the bio part of it, is it more of a mobility problem that they might be having? Is it more of a kind of a movement habits / movement quality problem, / stability problem, or
what would be an example of a bio problem?
Like bio, just looking at
proprioception, you mean? Or
I'm looking at more of just like, just the body part of things, like not taking into account like the stresses they have at work, or like other things like that. I'm just looking at like straight up movement. And sometimes we just stick to that, but sometimes just somebody comes in and they have a bunch of other stuff going on. So you have to, like, the reason why their shoulders are up here and their traps are always tight is because they're stressed at work, or they're breathing poorly, or whatever. So,
But
if we're sticking to mainly like movement stuff, I'm looking at, are they more mobility, more stability, or a combination of both. Usually it's a combination of both. Some people are blatantly just super stiff. They're lacking like 50% of their potential joint mobility.
Like the Tremblays?
Well, everyone's got their own like levels of mobility, but some people just are.
You've got some mobility. He's saying there's some hope for you.
You can get your arm overhead. That's good.
Yeah,
That's good. Yeah. No, exactly. So that's kind of. I usually start on like what I find the biggest factor might be in terms of like why something. I try to get to the bottom of like why are they in pain. That's right. And is it because certain joints don't move? We like to look at the body, through regional interdependence. So it's like one part affects the other part. Mm-hmm. If your hips are super stuck and your ankles don't move, your knees are going to have a little bit of a tough time along the way. So things like that. So I'll try to address these things. And then I kind of like organize things. What's our biggest priority? What do we want to start on? Some people, it's just like, let's get them moving. That's the first goal. Some people, it's let's develop some habits. Let's start working on your mobility. But I usually spend some like hands-on time with somebody. So I'll work on a bit of manual therapy. I tend to do a lot more like tissue work. I do some dry needling. So these are just tools as needed. And but they can help people just, open up windows of opportunity to then work further into. And then I'll usually bring them out. And you guys see me when I'm out in the gym.
Almost like a warm-up before a workout.
Warm up, loosen things up a little bit, create some space, get them moving with my assistants, break some fear, and then go out in the gym. And you guys see me there. So that's where we might be doing more mobility that day. We might be working on some fundamental movements.
Yeah.
We might be loading them up a little bit. A lot of people just need to be introduced to a bit of load. Somebody comes in with a frozen shoulder.
Yeah.
The first thing I'm doing is handing them some kettlebells. I'm getting them to walk with it. Like just handle some load because they've been guarding that shoulder for so long, not using it. Even their brain's acknowledgement of that shoulder just goes out the window.
So it doesn't even exist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff. And then from there, just kind of building them up. If we start on mobility, but we need to address movement as well, we'll get to that maybe in session 2. And then I try to layer on like a good home program. So depending on if the individual if they're a mover, if they've got some basic concepts, I'll give them some more stuff to work on. Day 1, if it's somebody who's very fresh, I might just give them 1 or 2 things and be like, work on this for a week or 2 and come see me. So
come back and
I don't want to overwhelm them, even though I want to help them improve.
So you'll have a very wide variety of clients, right? Like you'll have
for sure
the athlete come in, you'll have like the triathletes that come in and say like, I need to get back on the bike with my knees not hurting. Or you'll have, an older woman come in and say like, I want to be able to pick up my grandkid.
Exactly. It's a combination. And for the athletic populations, a lot of it boils down to like load management and stress management. So it's like, yes, you might be moving pretty well. Maybe we can clean up some things, but sometimes it's just a matter of like, we need to get you to back off. We need to do these few things. Maybe we need to work around. We need to figure out how to work around some stuff in the short term so we can layer it back in. And a lot of athletes do this naturally. A lot of trainers work on this stuff too. So there's overlap between different fields, but just you take it for granted, like these little, even a different perspective. Like somebody comes to you and you're like, okay, maybe you've never seen this thing before. This can help you do, get to this point, and then we can add this back in. So different ways of doing things. You're almost trying to like troubleshoot and figure out a plan for people along the way.
That's cool. Do you see a lot of CrossFitters?
I would say not like no more than like anybody else. I do see quite not quite a few, but I will see a few from around the Barhaven area, and then like in the city. I've worked with quite a few in the past though on different things, and sometimes it's a matter of just like some cleaning up some mobility for them, and to get them back in action.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happily surprised a lot of times with their baseline level of movement and even mobility. A lot of times it's like they've got some of these fundamentals nailed already. So it's just a matter. Sometimes it comes down to load management with them too.
Mm-hmm.
Or I mean, as we know, like a lot of people work at the desks these days.
That's
and it's just like sometimes it's just a matter of like, hey, you need to prioritize some more mobility work, and you need to undo your desk job so that you can get back into action a little bit.
Right.
So yeah, it's like any sport, I'd say though, like it's like I'll see the young hockey players sometimes. Like I see 13, 14, 15-year-old hockey players, and they're some of the worst for just like super stiff, and they just go from like sitting all day slouching at school and then
ripping
they
on the ice.
Yeah. It's like okay, something's
gonna
give
zero warm up.
Yeah. And that's definitely one of the challenges I think with running a CrossFit class, with the huge demographic and the types of people that are some are construction workers, some are desk job people, and it's like trying to educate them in the group setting of, okay, maybe you need to take a little bit more time in your warm up, or maybe today's skill isn't actually where you're going heavy, but you're just going to continue warming up, and then the back half of class is where you're going to crank the intensity. Something like that, just to make sure they're not overdoing it and then going straight back to their desk or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah. It's how you piece it into their day in life, and it's like everything is always dynamic. Like they might not be there. It's like working with individuals. Like they might not be there today, but in a month or 2 months they might be there. So it's allowing a good coach will guide the person towards where they want to be, but also knows when to hold them back when they probably shouldn't be doing something. And I've seen some good things out of you guys too, and what you how you program things, because like little nuances, like hey, even the class I took with you guys, it's like little things like you will give people tips along the way, and maybe kind of suggest that maybe they don't go heavier today, and maybe they should just keep it at something like that. So little things go a long way. I think that's what makes the difference between a good facility and somewhere that's more average or not so good, or somewhere there where people might get injured more, or somewhere where people are very almost bulletproof because of the coaching quality that they have. So yeah, it's key, and I think that same principle applies to all sports and coaching in different sports. It's that the mentality of like go hard all the time is not. It's kind of something you got to play around with, and know when to pull back, and then know when to when to push them. Sometimes people need to push more. That's the other thing. It's like, yeah. And
it's just I totally agree with you. And not assuming, I think, like you said, the good coach is the one that's going to vocalize sort of what they're thinking in terms of, we call it threshold training.
Okay.
Turning up the intensity, dialing it back when it's needed.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, I think people assume that the athlete knows what they should be doing in that moment.
Exactly.
And the coaches are thinking in their head, they know exactly what should happen, but instead of vocalizing it and telling the athlete like, hey, let's dial it back a little bit today, they just assume that they're going to do it on their own or something, right? When really they need your advice.
Yeah, because you've seen patterns, you've worked through it yourself. When you see hundreds or thousands of people over time, you're like, okay, I've seen this scenario before, and it, like, you're right. Sometimes it's a matter of like, okay, you've seen it, but can you actually vocalize it, and can you get it across to them in a way that that sits well with them too? It's like, we're not saying that you're weak or anything. We're not saying. Yeah. It's like, we're just, we're looking out for you, and once they know that, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Do you took a class here? You took a couple classes here, yeah?
One so far.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We'll get you in for number 2 pretty soon here.
Yeah, I need to.
But what are, like, do you notice similarities between just like, I mean, aside from the fact that we're working out at intensity compared to you with your physio practice are definitely a lot lower intensity, relatively speaking. It's probably intense for some people.
No, exactly.
But I noticed the first thing when I walked into your physio clinic at Riverside South, I was like, dude, this is a CrossFit gym. I was like, there's a CrossFit gym with like doctor's offices over here and a couple beds in the corner.
Yeah.
Like,
there's like a little mini rig in the back and like some matting and kettlebells and bumper plates. And
we wanted it to be primarily like a movement facility, so people are comfortable whatever level they're at and moving and getting, like, we have balance beams now. We're gonna keep adding to that, just more stuff, like create a more of a movement experience for people. Because people are just always I think their experience with movement is very stale. So you're right. It's just we're working out at a lower intensity, or I guess you consider it just not necessarily working out. Some people I will push them because maybe they're trying to get back to sport, and we do need to see what happens. Like,
or they've been seeing you for a while and they're at that point in the progression.
Exactly.
Right.
So we do need to kind of stress test people sometimes, but yeah, we're more kind of at that point. Once I feel like they're comfortable, then they can go back to whatever they like to do, whether it's CrossFit, hockey, whatever it is. But our plays, I think they shouldn't look any different, right? We're doing similar stuff, just at maybe different intensities, and I think we are dealing with more pain, whereas you guys are dealing with more of the higher level fitness and function and
or
health.
They're pain free, looking to increase their fitness level, and then
exactly. So
that's
I think
cool.
pain
and
is
just
the
also
difference.
learn how to move properly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
any movement.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's really cool. Well,
cool.
Any more questions for Mike?
No, I'm good.
Sweet, man.
Yeah.
Well,
so we have you here every Wednesday, right?
Every Wednesday I'm here, and then Paul, one of our other therapists.
Yeah, Paul Fortin, also a member of CrossFit NCR.
He's here Fridays. So we'll.
That's awesome.
Book an appointment with me if you're ever interested. And thanks for having me, guys.
No problem. Thanks for being on. Thanks for being on. And we'll get you in for that second class pretty soon.
I'm down.
Okay,
Let's do it.
sweet.
On us.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds good.
Peace.